Last week, I made a video reacting to the casting news for the Children of Blood and Bone movie. And one of the things I mentioned in said video that I was quite upset about was Hollywood's insistence on making adaptation of YA novels and yet refusing to cast teenage actors and unknowns in the roles. When it happens once or twice, it can be looked at as an accident, but when in the last 2 decades there have been scores, almost hundreds of young adult novels and stories with very adult cast, it starts to rankle a little. And I figured, why not make a video to talk about it? And if you have thoughts you would like to add to this discussion, please share them in the comments because honestly, Hollywood, we really need to talk about this. Now, I want you to take your mind back to your first ever experience with a teenage protagonist in a movie you saw. Who was it? What role were they playing in the movie or show? Was it a minor one? A major one? Were they able to really flex their muscles and show their budding capabilities as actors? And most importantly, were they playing an age appropriate role, do you think? Because all of these questions matter when we talk about the dearth of teenage actors in Hollywood. The reason I ask is because before Hollywood attempted to convince me that 22-year-old Emma Watson was the perfect person to play 18-year-old Sam in the movie adaptation of Steven Chbosky's novel The Perks of Being a Wallflower, they had done better and given me better with Evan Rachel Wood. And so my expectations have always been set higher because I am aware that they can and have pulled it off successfully in the past. It's what makes the gradual change of it all more shocking and surprising for me. Now, I'm sure a lot of you looked at that age difference. Emma is just 4 years older than the character she's meant to portray and see no problem with it. It is, quite honestly, isn't as egregious as some of the other examples I'm going to mention further on in this video. But 22 is not 18. 22 is legal age. It's drinking age, it's voting age, it's adult age within the US. 18, not so much. Now compare that with who I mentioned earlier, Evan Rachel Wood. The first time I ever saw her was in the 2001 movie Little Secrets, which starred her, Michael Angarano, yes, the one of Oppenheimer and Will and Grace fame, and David Gallagher. Evan played 14-year-old Emily, and that movie was what cultivated my love for classical music and my fondness for Brahms. But get this. Evan Rachel Wood was 14 years old when Little Secrets was released. She was a 14-year-old actress who was given a role as a lead in a movie that centered her playing as Emily, nosy neighborhood secrets keeping Emily. Michael and David were equally as young, and the writer and director of the movie agreed that because it was a kids' film, they were going to find kids to play the role. Their open casting call was for children and teens in Salt Lake City, where it was shot, and they filled out the minor roles. The only roles that adults had were as their parents and healthcare providers and the person delivering their mail. And sure, Little Secrets got mixed reviews when it dropped, but I loved it and I wore out the CD because it was one of my absolutely favorite movies growing up. There was no suspension of disbelief necessary. It was meant to be a wholesome family movie with the preteens and teenagers at the center of it, and Little Secrets pulled it off. The casting was spot on, and Evan Rachel Wood, Michael Angarano, and David Gallagher all had that movie on their portfolio and were able to use it to get more work. Now, I'm sure someone is about to come into my comments and say, well, Noria, sure you can say that, but not all the movies and shows that are about teenagers are awesome stories. Some of them are hard hitting and raw, and you cannot necessarily get teenage actors to bring that level of vulnerability and commitment and connection to the character being depicted on screen like an adult can. And to that I say, balderdash. You can tell compelling, heart wrenching, maybe even taboo stories about teenagers with a teenage cast as well. You just have to do it with a bit more guardrails. Have adult supervisions on site, their parents or guardians, people who are there to look out for their interests and ensure that nothing untoward is happening. And I do think that casting age appropriately also helps mitigate this trend in Hollywood where teenage bodies are so sexualized with how adults they are made to look because they are being played by adults. Yes, I am looking at you, Sam Levinson. Yes, I do think you're gross. Ew. And yes, Euphoria is a great show to look at with this regard, tackling hard, difficult, almost taboo topics as it relates to teenagers and their experiences. Except for the slightly gratuitous framing of some scenes. Once again, ew, Sam Levinson. But most importantly, majority of Euphoria's teenage cast are in their mid to late 20s, and I recognize that I stand between a rock and a hard place because I don't want teenage girls anywhere near Sam Levinson. Not like he's been accused of anything. No, am I accusing him of anything? I'm just irked. And no, I'm not talking about censorship or trying to operate within some misguided beliefs about teenage purity. Teenagers have sex, teenagers drink, teenagers do drugs. All of these are experiences a lot of us have either partaken in or watched our classmates and friends partake in back when we were teenagers. I'm not about censoring that. I do believe that these stories need to be told because they are authentic to the teenage experience as well. I just believe that if they are being told, we can actually have teenagers be the one who get to depict that, and in so doing, keep the authenticity of that experience whilst owning their craft and growing their portfolio. The greats become greats in the industry by amassing experience and becoming better with every role that they take and get the chance to embody. And I do believe if we are benefiting from these stories or being told these stories, then it is only appropriate that we have teenagers be the ones through which these stories are shared with us. And for those who are about to get on my case of, well, it wouldn't feel authentic or that it can be done, might I direct you yet again to She Who Owns My Art, Evan Rachel Wood. Back in 2003, a movie about a seventh grade student who, as a result of the turmoil present in her family life, was dealing with self-harm and substance abuse, and then befriends another troubled classmate, thereby adding even more drugs, sex, and crime into the mix, was released. The movie was titled 13, and it starred then 15 going on 16-year-old Evan Rachel Wood as Tracy, and 14 about to turn 15-year-old Nikki Reed. Yes, Rosalie from Twilight, as Tracy's troubled classmate. It was a story that was raw and brutal, especially considering that part of it drew inspiration from Nikki Reed's own life. She, i.e. Nikki, co-wrote part of the movie with Catherine Hardwicke, who wrote most of the film, directed it, and starred in it. I watched 13 as a teenager, and considering I watched it shortly after I saw Girl Interrupted for the first time, let's just say teenage Noria went through it. It was a stunning, brutal movie, shot simply, yes, but also powerful. And Evan's portrayal of Tracy, Nikki's portrayal of Evie, they stuck with me. They had me think and consider and ask myself what kind of life I would have had my family been different. Had I had a different set of friends, gone to a different school? Would I have caught myself when things got too much and I couldn't fit into my own skin? How would I have processed all that emotions? And it made me appreciate my mother a little bit more, or as much as a teenager could anyway. So when I hear people say things like teenagers can't act, I always beg to differ. When I hear them say that teenagers can't do drama or carry the weight of a performance where they're absolutely devastated and have to be vulnerable, I beg to differ. Tom Holland was 14 when he filmed his role in the 2012 disaster movie, The Impossible, where he plays Lucas, the eldest son of a family caught in the wake of the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. The movie was released when Tom was 16, and I kid you not, every time I rewatch it, I am awed, inspired by the breadth of emotions that Tom Holland is able to convey in that film to show just how devastated he is at the thought and possibility of losing his father and siblings in the wake of a natural disaster. If you've only seen Tom Holland in the Spider-Man movies, you might have missed the fact that he has been putting in quite the work and building his acting chops since he was a kid. And that is a perfect segue for us to address the fact that Hollywood doesn't have a problem with child actors. In fact, they are rife with them. The likes of Macaulay and Kieran Culkin got their big breaks as child stars. Anna Paquin won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress at age 11 for her role in The Piano. Drew Barrymore is Hollywood royalty and has been acting since she was a child. Same with Lindsay Lohan. The Olsen twins got their big break as literal babies on Full House and went on to star in a slew of movies made by their own production house. And of course, we have the Harry Potter crew: Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, Rupert Grint, Tom Felton. Hollywood loves to cast child actors. They are patient with them and always happy and open to the potential of an unknown child on a production set and what it could bring. But few of Hollywood productions centers child stars as the heart of the story. Not like we had with Kevin in Home Alone, not like we had Lindsay Lohan in The Parent Trap, not like Drew Barrymore in Firestarter. And with the shows, the only ones that centered children and later teens were the ones on Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, and to some extent ABC. Melissa Joan Hart was the face of Clarissa Explains It All at 16. Tia and Tamira started their sister run at 14. You have the cast of Jessie, rest in peace Cameron, all getting their break on the show. Yara Shahidi, Masai Martin, and Miles Brown with Blackish. It felt more like they were put to the side, not considered for serious stories with a mass appeal. And they're relegated to a behind the scenes or away from adult eye stage that just always, once again, irks me. Because I grew up watching Spy Kids, and yes, Antonio Banderas and Carla Gugino and Alan Cumming had major roles in the movie. But if you watch Spy Kids, you know that Junie and Carmen were the star of the whole show. Alexa Vega and Daryl Sabara, which, by the way, did you all know that Daryl is married to Meghan Trainor? Because I didn't find out until like 2022, 2023. And I was like, all about that base married Junie? What an interesting world. But as I was saying, the roles of Carmen and Junie were important to the movies. And they were both played by a kid and a teenager. A lot of the time we talk about representation in media, and I always wonder why we don't push for teens to have that representation too. Why Hollywood is so insistent on not giving teenagers that opportunity as well. Especially because Hollywood is aware that the teenage fan base is huge. That teenage girls and teenage boys would spend their allowance, their money on things that interest them. The Twilight movies were watched globally by a wide variety of audience, but teenage girls drove the fever to those movies, just as they drove the fever for the books. And I know a lot of people might not agree with me, but I do belong in the minority who thinks that Kirsten Stewart was a great pick for that role. If you've read the books and the absolute lack of presence that is the character of Bella Swan, you will know she was a great pick. And the age is right too. Kirsten got the role at 17. Bella Swan at the start of the Twilight books is 17. Compare that with Katniss Everdeen in the Hunger Games, who is meant to be 16 and was played by then 20-year-old Jennifer Lawrence, who turned 22 when the movie was released. Peter is also meant to be 16, but Josh Washington was 18 when he got the role and 20 when it was released. Liam Hemsworth's Gale was the oldest at 18, but he too was 22 when the movie was released. Which, yes, is close in age, but just like I stated at the start of this video with Emma Watson's role in The Perks of Being a Wallflower, closer in age is an excuse for Hollywood to bring on board slightly older actors rather than take their chances with younger teenage actors. And it's especially damning when what Hollywood is doing is adapting YA stories that are marketed to these teenagers, who more often than not have the characters that they're picturing in their heads as the teenagers being described on page. And it has always had me wondering why they don't get to see that reflected on screen then. How is Shailene Woodley a great pick for 16-year-old Tris in Divergent when she was casted for the role at 21? And it's even more egregious because she was also casted for the role of 16-year-old Hazel in The Fault of Our Stars, another YA novels, at 22. Or Joey King being casted as Tally Youngblood in The Uglies, who is meant to be 15. Hence why some of her choices in the books and later in the movies, I was able to wave it off as an adult because you know what? What did we know at 15? Tally is 15 in the books and Joey King was 21 when she was casted to play the role back in 2020. The Uglies dropped in 2024, at which point Joey was a whole ass decade older than the character she was meant to portray. And this has been consistent for Hollywood in movies and shows. Clary Frey is 15 in City of Bones, the first book in the Mortal Instruments series. She's played in the TV show Shadowhunters by Catherine McNamara, who is 6 years older. And in the City of Bones movie, she's played by Lily Collins, who was 24. And yes, it's that same Lily Collins from Emily in Paris. Lucas Scott is meant to be 16 at the start of One Tree Hill, and Chad Michael Murray was 22 when he played that role. And don't get me started on Logan Lerman being casted as 12-year-old Percy Jackson in the Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Lightning Thief movie, at 18. With the casting of Children of Blood and Bone, Hollywood is once again following a trusted path of preferring to go for an older, much older cast rather than keeping the story age appropriate. And it sucks. It sucks so much because young black actors deserved that break. They deserved the chance to be in the spotlight. They deserved the chance to play roles closer to their ages as it was written. Instead of Hollywood having actors in their mid-20s to early 30s playing 16-year-olds, by the gods, why does Hollywood hate teenagers? We went from an era of Hilary Duff at 16 playing 16-year-old Lizzie McGuire to Thuso Mbedu at 33 playing 17-year-old Zelie. And your girl is tired. Because if this isn't hatred, If this isn't Hollywood being resistant to putting safety mechanisms in place to have teens get to film and grow in their craft whilst being watched over by adults who are there to protect them, like Catherine Adwick did for Nikki Reed and Evan's parents did for her on the set of 13. If it isn't about Hollywood thinking about money and how they can keep their production costs low because they don't want to be forced to have to film within a limited timeline to make way for the kids to be in school, and they want to have shows that run for 20 seasons if possible, and kids grow up and change and look different, which complicates filming, i.e. what happened with Stranger Things. If it isn't those things, I don't know what else it could be. All I do know is give teenagers a chance, Hollywood. Give them a chance. Let them earn their way, earn their place, grow. Grow in their craft. And for the love of all things holy and unholy, stop casting 30-year-olds as teenagers. I beg you. No 16-year-old boy is having the body of KJ Appa. Stop forcing this weird-ass beauty standards on teenagers, by the love of God. If you enjoyed anything I had to say, hit the like button, drop a comment if you want to, support me on Patreon if you can afford to. Until next time, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.